Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here. And in U.S. legal news, we need to talk about the American Privacy Rights Act, or APRA, A-P-R-A. And I think this is an important one. And here's what you need to know. Now, if you didn't know this was happening in U.S. Congress, you should, because this directly impacts all of us for very, very good reasons in terms of our cybersecurity and our privacy. Now, I'm cribbing from Jennifer Gregory of Security Intelligence here, who had a really good write-up on this. And here's what's going on, because after years of work and unsuccessful attempts at legislation, and Lord knows I've talked about it over the years, finally, a draft of a federal data privacy law was recently released. The U.S. House Committee on Energy and Commerce released the American Privacy Rights Act this past April 7th of this year. And again, it's known as APRA or APRA. Now, several issues stood in the way of passing legislation in the past. Like, for example, states could issue tougher rules if individuals could sue companies for privacy violations, and on and on. Obviously, when you're talking about states adding rules, you've got California, Illinois, and some others that have done their own thing. The CCPA in California, the BIPA here in Illinois. Now, with the American Privacy Rights Act, the U.S. government established the first national privacy policy, establishing a national consumer data privacy right. Also, it sets standards for data security as well. Specific entities are excluded from this legislation, including small businesses, governments, entities working on behalf of governments, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Nonprofits are only required to follow data security standards as well. Now, as part of this act, the FTC, or Federal Trade Commission, will establish a new bureau to enforce violations, which would be treated which essentially it's looking for unfair or deceptive practices under the FTC Act. Now, that is a good thing, because one of the things that have been floated previously is having the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Agency be an enforcement wing, and that is something we in the cybersecurity community have said absolutely not, because CISA is there to help us offer guidelines and all of that. If they're coming in to basically fine you or slap you down, nobody's going to want to work with them, which is the antithesis of their mission. So I think that is a good thing, that it's going under the FTC umbrella and not going to CISA. Now, one of the key parts of this act is that it replaces the current disparate state privacy laws, as I've mentioned, and that is being referred to as preemption. Now, because companies had to follow laws in the various states, again, California, Illinois, etc., in which the customer resided, it's been challenging to ensure compliance with different laws in many states. However, states can still pass their own privacy laws in some instances, such as civil rights and consumer protections. And in crafting the APRA, the lawmakers were preserving standards from California, Illinois, and the state of Washington as well. The 140-page draft of APRA basically details specific standards and processing, but here's 5 key parts basically to take away from the new bill that, as listed out. So, with that, the first one is individuals harmed by data breaches can now sue corporations. Lawmakers use the language from the CCPA in California, which is the Consumer Privacy Rights Act, that basically gave Californians or individuals that were harmed by a data breach the power to sue. From basically the lawsuit, consumers can actually recover damages, get injunctive relief or declaratory relief, and reasonable attorney fees and costs. So that obviously is a really good thing that we would have nationwide. The second one to understand is that companies are limited in the type of data they can collect and use. Big fan of that as well. Organizations will be required to have a privacy policy that details data collection processes and how you as a consumer can opt out no matter what state you're in. The act also restricts the collection and transfer of specific types of data, such as biometric information, something that we guard here in Illinois, or genetic information, without the individual's expressed consent, meaning they can't trade it unless you're opting in which case you can sue. So that obviously is very good. Now, the third point here to understand is that Americans gain greater control of their data. The APRA essentially gives Americans the ability to stop companies and data brokers from transferring or selling their data. Consumers can also opt out of targeted advertising. Big fan of that too. Additionally, the act requires consent from the consumer for companies to transfer sensitive data to a third party. In other words, it's giving us the same control that basically the Europeans have. This is absolutely fantastic. I'm a huge fan of this. 4, it creates a national registry of data brokers. That's a huge one because we have no idea where it's going, and the Facebooks of the world will sell our data to pretty much anybody that has the cash. Now they've got to register. Now a list will be created that we can see because as part of this legislation, the FTC is going to maintain this registry. All data brokers will also need to keep a public website that identifies themselves exactly as a data broker. Consumers, including individuals with disabilities, must be able to control data and also can opt out from collection on websites with a do not collect mechanism that would be enforced. So you're signing into Facebook, you can now hit do not collect and Facebook can go screw itself. That's a huge one. That is absolutely fantastic. And the final point to mention, and there's more in it, but these are the 5 big ones that was mentioned in security intelligence, and I think these are great, which is why I simply copy and pasted. Thank you, Jennifer, for that. But the 5th one is companies must designate a privacy or data security officer, which I think is actually important. Now, while most companies can appoint either a privacy or data officer, large data holders must designate both along with the following additional requirements, such as filing with the FTC annually. Companies are not required to create a standalone position, but can add these responsibilities to an existing role. And this is something that if you've looked at any compliance framework from NIST to ISO, yeah, you have to have a designated security and compliance officer, but now it's going to be required, meaning the buck stops with that person. It's not just a scapegoat. It's somebody that you as a consumer can go to and say, hey, you are violating my privacy, or I want to opt out of something, and they must comply. Now, because this act is still in discussion, it's a draft at the moment, the next steps are not quite set. Obviously, there's no official date yet for this, but this is legislation that is currently being recommended, and it seems like it's going to come out of committee for a floor vote. And I can't imagine, unless you're completely bought off as a member of Congress by the Facebooks of the world, why wouldn't you vote for this? It ensures privacy. And one thing that politicians love to talk about is our constitutional right. We have a constitutional right to privacy. And when the Constitution was created back in the 18th century, literally, they didn't have an understanding of data traffic, internet. I mean, the population was 3 to 5 million in the United States, and now we're almost 300 or around 350 million. It's time that we keep up with technology in terms of our rights to privacy, and this does that. So I'm a huge fan. We'll see where this goes, but right now, honestly, that committee is doing the cyber lord's work, and I hope it passes, and I'm pretty sure you probably agree with me. And if not, why? Why? Let me know. I'd be curious to hear. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, where we'll be able to opt out of things. That's great. Same with YouTube as well. Please subscribe. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please attempt to stay private, which will be a lot easier if APRA passes. Take care.